Thank you for listening to the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast, hosted by Kari. The views and opinions expressed here are strictly those of the person who gave them. Take what you like and leave the rest. These views and opinions do not represent any specific 12-step program, only my experience, strength, and hope in recovering from the dis-ease of addiction and codependency. If you'd like to learn more, please visit my website at www.luminousrecoveryyoga.com. Hey, this is Kari. Thank you for joining me for the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast. It's so awesome to share this space with you. I really appreciate an opportunity to just share from the heart and kind of just tell you what's going on in my life and see if that resonates. I find that sometimes when people share honestly, there's more that we have in common than we don't. So if you find this space useful, it would be awesome to hear from you. You can leave a comment or just send me an email. I love hearing from my students. I also want to take an opportunity to make a little plug for Yoga of 12-Step Recovery. If you find that this podcast is helpful or useful to you, try checking out the Yoga of 12-Step Recovery class/meeting that I hold every week at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Basically, I introduce a topic very similar to this one. I'll share on that topic, and then I open it up for sharing for everybody else. And then once everyone's shared, we take it to the mat. In Y12SR, our tagline is that the issues live in our tissues. And so by our intentional themed yoga practice, guided by our breath, we find that it creates a really nice opportunity to explore these concepts both on and off the mat. So with that being said, my topic for today is Drishti. If you watched earlier in the week, I released a video about what Drishti is. So if you want a little bit more information about Drishti, you can watch and catch that video. But just to catch you up to speed, Drishti is a Sanskrit term that means focused gaze. The root word of the word Drishti is drsh, which means to see. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. Just giving you a little Sanskrit lesson. So Drishti is a concept that I learned in yoga. I'd say pretty early on, the teachers would always tell me to set my eyes to one place in the room. And whether I was in a warrior pose or even a half pigeon pose where, you're just feeling the stretch in your hips, I found that before I understood the concept of Drishti, I felt like the googly eyes in the pose, like my eyes were just all over the place. And when I learned how to set a focused gaze in the pose, I started to notice that my whole practice was transforming. So just to give you a little backup, I wear glasses. And at the time when I first started practicing yoga, I would wear contacts. And I would find that early on in the practice, when I would practice with my contacts in, I could see way too much. I would get distracted by the person who was next to me or anything that was moving around in the room. And I found that I was constantly occupied by everything but myself and a little bit of a busybody in the pose. So what I started doing was actually taking my contacts out and practicing, as I like to say, like blind as a bat, because I really can't see anything without my glasses or contacts. So I would find that by taking out my contacts and not practicing with glasses on, suddenly the room was just kind of a blur. And what was interesting about that is that I could no longer see what other people were doing. And it made it actually much harder to compare myself to other people, which is something that early on I was really, really good at, comparing myself to other people. Like, oh, I don't look like them in the pose, or they look better at that than me, or is that what it's supposed to look like? Just so much chit chat in my mind based on what I was seeing. So when I started practicing without glasses or contacts and the room was just a blur, suddenly I could only see like large globular looking objects. So it became much easier to set my eyes to one thing that I can see and begin to generate a focused mind. As I like to say to students, focused gaze equals focused mind. Focused mind equals less of a wandering mind. So when we can focus our eyes, oftentimes all of the chit chat in our mind can settle. And there's a physicality to that. When we set our eyes to one point, we're creating a focus in our brain. And that focus helps to just settle a lot of the extra internal noise. So I really started to take this concept of a focused gaze and apply it to other places in my life. I started to notice that if I was in a situation where I would get a little panicky, if I could just set my eyes to one point and start to breathe, then the chit chat in my mind and a lot of that just anxiety would settle. Or even silly things, like if I was trying to focus on drinking water. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, I'm going to drink like this much water. And if I would set my eyes to a point on the wall and I would just drink my water. And suddenly I found that I could just focus on what I was trying to do a lot easier. So there really is something to focusing the eyes in order to settling the mind. And this really works in the yoga pose, but it also works in other areas of life. I'll never forget one of the first times I was going to a new yoga studio and I was about to be late for class. And then I get slammed by, not like physically slammed by, but there was a train and I got stopped by the train. So all of a sudden I'm very agitated and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss yoga class. And I'm like getting way hyper about how I believe I'm gonna be late and I'm gonna miss this class, and like basically the opposite of what I wanted to be feeling on the way to yoga. So I'm getting really like upset sitting in my car, and all of a sudden it dawns on me to focus my eyes and breathe. And so I did. I just set my eyes somewhere like maybe on the train tracks, and I just let the train keep moving past me. And I was breathing and I was focusing, and before I knew it, I could feel my body calming down. And that's when it really hit me for the very first time how these principles apply on and off the mat. Kind of like we say in recovery, we practice these principles in all our affairs. And it's not kind of like that, it is like that. We do practice these principles in all of our affairs. And so whether it's physical principles on the yoga mat or recovery tools that help me, manage and navigate life, I find that these things really apply in most areas of my life. One of the things my teacher, Baron Baptiste, says is, where attention goes, energy flows. And I think that this is really important when you pair it with the concept of drishti. Our eyes are, as an able-bodied seeing person, my eyes are one of the first things that perceive the world. So I often see something long before I can smell it or hear it or taste it or any of my senses get a hold of it. My eyes see it first. So our eyes are really, as that saying goes, the window to the world, right? Like it's how I'm able to perceive the world around me are through my eyes. And oftentimes it's the very first thing, the very first sense that picks up on what's happening around me. So sometimes my eyes see something and it immediately sends signals to my brain, and I'm judging or I'm getting into a story, or, my eyes are basically telling my brain what's happening. And so I find that if I'm not disciplined in where I'm placing my attention, that sometimes my energy flows a little wild. So I really started to notice this when it came to my relationship to Instagram and Facebook. So about a year ago, I could really start to see how Instagram was kind of like ruining my life a little bit, because I'd go on Instagram and I would see images that would start to prompt pretty rageful thoughts, whether it was like people are having more fun than me, or people are making more money than me, or, whatever story I was telling myself about the things that I was seeing on Instagram. I'm not a good yoga teacher. These people are better yoga teachers than me. If only I could afford this training or afford to go to that place. Like I would just start to tell myself all of these crazy stories. And they were crazy because they weren't really rooted in any type of reality other than, it's that FOMO, or that, it's really what consumerism does to us, is it has us believing that we're not okay, we don't have enough, and that there's something external that will provide me with my happiness. And so, Instagram and Facebook are really large culprits when it comes to, I think, how we sometimes are feeling about ourselves, but we aren't necessarily recognizing that it's from the images and the messages that we're seeing. And so, as a person who really loves the practice of drishti, and it's something that I really firmly believe in as far as, a principle that I practice in my poses and off the mat, I started to notice the way I would feel when I would be on Instagram for too long. And by too long, I mean, 5 to 15 minutes. I came to realize that it wasn't that I was looking at social media for very long, but I was doing these constant short stints all throughout the day. Like every few minutes I was like doom scrolling, right? And even though I wouldn't doom scroll for that long, it was just still this constant stimulus that was coming in. So I started to notice like the relationship between my thinking and what I was seeing when it came to my behavior on Instagram. And I really started to notice that where my attention goes, my energy flows. And so if my attention was going to all of these images of people, being better than me, then that was what my thinking and where my energy was starting to flow. And that's the interesting thing about social media. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but we're comparing our insides to other people's outsides, right? We're comparing ourselves to what we can see that other people are showing us, right? And oftentimes that's not real. Like we all know people out there who seem to be living it up on Instagram, but in real life, maybe their life isn't so great, right? Like that's really, I think, the story that social media often is trying to tell us is, there's that fear of missing out or that other people are doing better than we are. And, in reality, in a consumer society, that keeps us buying, it keeps us on Instagram, it keeps us, like really wrapped up in that consumerist lifestyle. So I started to notice that every time I went on Instagram, it would be followed by just some pretty uneasy thinking and feeling. Like I would feel sick to my stomach. And one of the things I've heard people and marketers and, just smart people in general say, which is that on a platform like Instagram or Facebook, when it's free for the user, it's because we are the product, right? Like it's free for us to use Instagram and Facebook because ultimately they're trying to sell us things. Everybody's trying to sell us things. I'm even wanting you to watch this podcast episode, right? Like in some way, we're all trying to sell ourselves or get attention. And that's what those platforms are for. It's for getting attention. It's for getting other people's eyeballs on our stuff. So, I really started to notice that where I was sending my attention was on stuff that was physically making me feel sick. Whether it was like mentally unwell or physically unwell, I just wasn't living my best life being on Instagram all day long. So I removed Instagram and I decided that I was going to take a break from it. And I didn't have any specific timeline, like it wasn't, a 30-day fast or anything like that. I just stopped going on there. And I was being really intentional about not putting my eyeballs there. And before I knew it, it was crazy how much my attitude started to improve and how much better I started to feel just about my life in general, not anybody else's life, right? Because it's never about anybody else. It's only ever about us or me. It's only ever about me. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean that in the way I perceive the world, right? Like that's my reality, the way I see other people. It's not as they are, it's as I am. I don't see people as they are. I see them as I am. So I noticed that when I took Instagram out of my daily repertoire of things that I do, that I started to feel better. And this is not a value judgment about whether or not you should be on Instagram. Like, do what you want, do what makes you happy. But this is all coming back to this idea of drishti and where we are putting our eyes, where we focus our physical attention. And as I said earlier, where attention goes, energy flows. So if I put my attention on how I don't have enough and I'm not, pretty like the other girls, or my yoga practice doesn't look like somebody else, or I'm not, whatever it is, like that neurotic thinking, if I put my attention there, then I'm fueling my energy and I'm sending energy into those thoughts. And so where my attention goes, my energy is flowing. I'm flowing my energy into negativity. I'm flowing my energy into basically behaviors that I don't want. So this became very obvious to me once I got off Instagram, which was that Instagram was killing my brain. It was really hurting my emotional body. And so it became really important to get off Instagram for that period of time. And then once I reintegrated the social media platforms back into my life, that there were just boundaries around it, because I can't just write a blank check to Mark Zuckerberg. I cannot just look at these things without any boundaries around how long and how much I should be taking in of these platforms. And at the time, I did not have any of those boundaries at all. And so I think that, where we put our eyes is really important. And this applies both on and off the mat. So, going back to yoga practice, setting our eyes to one physical point helps to ground, secure, and basically soothe the nervous system. When we're looking all over the place, it's sending a lot of information to the brain. But when we focus our eyes on one thing, then it helps to create that more focused vision. And I truly believe that the practice of drishti, of learning how to set a focused gaze, helps basically focus in all other areas of life. Learning how to physically focus on one point helps to nurture that spirit of focus in all other areas of my life. And so when I focus my eyes in the pose, I'm literally practicing focus. And focused eyes equal focused mind. So when I focus my eyes, I focus my mind. And one of the things I love about yoga is that it's a practice. And that's really all it ever is. It's always just a practice. And I really, truly believe that one of the most important things I have received from yoga is the value of practice. Having a value that everything is a practice, whether it's making YouTube videos or practicing yoga on the mat, or anything that I want to cultivate as a skill in my life requires practice. Repetition is the mother of mastery. I love that saying. Repetition is the mother of mastery. So anything that we want to get good at, we need to practice, and we need to do over and over again. And I really believe the same thing goes with focus. I think that as children, we're yelled at to focus, like sit down, focus, pay attention. Like I at least know that generationally, that was my experience, is that I was yelled at to focus. And it's like, well, how the hell do I do that? How the hell do I focus? I had no skills, right? I didn't know how to focus. And so I think that there's this cultural expectation that we focus and that we know how to focus. But how do we focus if we don't practice, right? Like, there is a practice involved in any skill that we want to cultivate. And I really believe that that includes the practice of focus, of actually learning how to engage with one thing at a time. And since I've cultivated this really important skill in my yoga practice, and I've been practicing for many years now, drishti has remained one of the most cornerstone pillars of my practice. And if you ever practice Baptiste yoga, that's the method of yoga that I practice. The first pillar of the 5 pillars, we have 5 pillars in Baptiste yoga, and the first pillar is drishti. And I really believe that this has helped me to generate that pillar as a really important piece of my whole life. And so, I want to bring this to you as a question. Where are you putting your attention? And I don't just mean like your mental attention. I mean, where are you actually putting your eyes? What are you actually looking at? I know for myself that anything that I watch before bed, whether it's a TV show or a movie or even videos, like whatever I'm focusing on before bed, I literally dream about. It is weird. I was watching a TV show the other night, and there were these characters, as all TV shows, there were these characters in the show, and I had dreams all night about these characters, and I was one of the characters, and I was in the thing, and it was just so weird, and this happens all the time. I remember when I was watching The Walking Dead, which is so violent and so gruesome and bloody and brutal, I would have zombie dreams all night, and I really didn't like that. But every night I would continue to end my evening with episodes of The Walking Dead, and then I would have Walking Dead dreams, which I don't know, that's not like really where I want to be. This was pre-yoga, many, many years ago when I was getting into that show. And I don't watch that show anymore because just that, when I put my attention on zombies, then I have zombie dreams. And so I've actually become much more aware that what I put my attention on before bed becomes my sleeping dreams, right? It becomes that movie that plays behind my eyes when I'm sleeping. So I really think that the practice of attention is really important to create intention. Attention creates intention. So the more attention that I spend on violent things or where I'm physically putting my eyes creates the intention for how I'm living my life. If I see violence, I'm more likely to be violent, right? And so I really think that there's something to this, that the practice of attention, of where we put our attention, really does create our inner world. So I'm asking you that. What are you putting your attention on? Where are you putting your physical eyes? What are you looking at? What are you reading? What are you watching? What YouTube videos are you watching? Right? I really do think that there's something to the practice of drishti and how we are perceiving the world around us, because our eyes are so powerful. And obviously I'm saying that as an able-bodied seeing person. I don't know the perspective of someone who can't see or can't use their eyes. But as a person who does have, vision as one of my senses, I find that vision is really, really powerful. And if I'm not careful with where I'm placing my vision, then it really jumbles up my mind and it jumbles up how I'm perceiving the world. So I'm bringing that to you this week as, a tool for recovery, but also yoga. One last thing to tie this into recovery. I remember when I first got into recovery and I was in the rooms of the 12-step rooms. And, one of my natures is to be an entertaining, funny person. I love telling stories. I love talking. And, I resonate on the energy that I get from people when I'm telling a story, especially if I'm being funny and I get laughs. Then I'm like, it fuels my storytelling energy. So what I noticed when I first got into the rooms of recovery was that at first when I would share, there would be this real experience of, well, what are they thinking of me? And like making sure that I would say the right thing to get the response that I wanted, right? Like if I would say something funny and the people in the room would laugh, I could find myself almost planning my shares in my head to make sure I had my good one-liners or to make sure that I was going to be funny or entertaining in my share. And this is very much who I was pre-recovery. I was really focused on what other people thought of me and how I was receiving in being received. And so the practice, and at the time I had about a year of a yoga practice before I got into the rooms of recovery. As a practice, I started looking at the floor. And I would set my eyes to one thing that I could see on the floor right in front of me, and I would share. And I found that just as in yoga, it would eliminate a lot of the chit chat in my head about what others were thinking of me and whether they thought my share was brilliant or if they thought that what I was saying was worthwhile. I started to notice that if I just set my eyes to one unmoving place on the floor, that I could really share from the heart, and that I could practice sharing in a way that was more in touch with what I wanted to say and share. And I was less concerned about whether or not people thought I was brilliant or if I was funny. And instead, I just kept that share more about my physical experience, but like the experience of sharing, so that I could clear my heart and my mind rather than making sure I was saying funny things or entertaining things. And this really affected the way I share. I was able to start just focusing on myself and focus on what I was saying rather than how everybody in the room perceived me. So this was one strategy that I took over from my yoga practice into my recovery practice so that I could just share me rather than worrying about who in the room was looking at me or smiling or, nodding because they got what I was saying. So I found that even in a recovery setting, learning how to focus my eyes to one unmoving point, creating a physical drishti, really helped me settle my body when I was sharing openly and honestly. So That's what I have to say about Drishti. I think Drishti is really important. And so if you don't have a Drishti practice in your yoga, I really encourage you to explore that, to see what it feels like to settle your eyes to one unmoving point and to let the noise of everything happening around you kind of fade away by just setting your focused gaze. And so I bring that to you today as an offering, and see how that settles in you. See where that lands in your body. Does that resonate with you? Do you think that you are googly eye when you're in yoga practice? Do you notice that you get really focused on the things happening around you? If you're someone who wears glasses and contacts, you can try my strategy of taking the glasses off or the contacts out so that you really are almost forced to just see what's in front of you rather than focusing on everybody and everything around you. And I don't know, let me know in the comments. Let me know, email me, let me know what you think about that. If Drishti is something that you have experimented with, and if that's a practice that would benefit your life and your yoga practice. So with that being said, let's transition to a yoga practice, and we'll just practice for a few minutes, but we'll put the focus on Drishti, and we'll really just put our attention on that one unmoving point and just see and notice how that resonates in your practice today. So with that being said, I'll meet you on the mat. Hello, my friend, welcome back. Let's get started in our yoga practice for today. And the theme of our practice is Drishti, or focused gaze. This won't be a long or complicated practice. The focus will be where we're placing our eyes and just holding the discipline of that steady gaze. So with that being said, let's begin on our back in supine butterfly. Come to lie down. Bring the soles of your feet to touch. And place both of your hands on your belly. Start with your eyes open and find one spot on the ceiling. If you're outside, you could do this with the sky, but just find one unmoving point where you can settle your gaze. And settle in to that focused Drishti point. And breathe. Begin to cultivate focus in your eyes and focus in your breath. One unmoving point where you can settle your attention. Where attention goes, energy flows. And we'll take just a couple more breaths right here. Now keep your eyes exactly where they are. Interlace your hands behind your head and let your elbows open wide. And then float your head, neck, and shoulders off the floor. Keep those elbows open. Now press the soles of your feet together and gently hover your feet about 2 or 3 inches off the mat. And just continue to hold your eyes to that one unmoving point. Now slowly begin to pulse your nose towards the ceiling, but keep your eyes exactly where they are for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly come down. Keep your eyes exactly where they are and take a full body stretch. Lengthen your legs forward. Take your arms over your head, but keep your eyes steady on that one point. Remember, this is a practice of discipline. And if your eyes veer away, don't worry. Just come back. Pull your knees to your chest. Place one hand on each knee. Continue to hold your eyes to that one point and just make a few circles with your low back into the floor. And when it feels natural, you'll switch directions, but keep holding your eyes to that one unmoving point. Focused eyes equal focused mind. Now open your arms into a T, drop your knees to the right, and on purpose, turn your gaze to your left thumb. And hold your eyes there. Big, deep breaths. And a focused gaze. Move your eyes back to the ceiling. Bring your knees back to the center. And now drop your knees to the left. And on purpose, turn your gaze to your right thumb. And continue to breathe in and out. And settle your eyes. And slowly make your way back to the center. Put your eyes back to the ceiling. Put your hands on your thighs. Keep looking at the ceiling and start to rock up and down a little bit. And even as you rock, keep your eyes on that one point. Come into boat pose. Look forward and balance on your sit bones. If this is a little bit too challenging, you can put your feet on the floor and pull your chest towards your thighs, or you can float your feet off the floor. But the most important thing here is that you have your eyes focused forward, somewhere forward. And breathe. We're here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Keep your eyes where they are. Cross your ankles, plant your hands, come to all fours, but keep your eyes looking forward. And now we'll move through some rounds of cat-cow. Begin to lift your gaze up and drop your belly. And now round your back, look at your belly button. Do it again. Inhale, lift up, look up. And exhale, round and look at your belly button. 3 more rounds. Keep noticing where your eyes land. One more round. Set your eyes forward. Downward facing dog. As soon as you lift your tailbone to the sky, set your eyes between your 2 big toes. Pedal your legs out a little bit, take some movement here, but hold your eyes to one steady, unmoving point. Notice what you notice, see what you see. And maintain the discipline of just looking at one focused, unmoving point. Pick your heels up off the mat, bend your knees, look forward, step to the top. Halfway lift, put your palms on your shins. Look about 8 inches forward of your mat. Keep the crown of your head long. Take a full inhale. Ragdoll pose. Fold over your thighs, catch your elbows, and set your gaze behind you. Maybe at the edge of your mat, maybe one spot on your floor. Just set your eyes to one thing you can see. Shake your head, yes and no, but hold your eyes to that steady point. we're building a practice of focus. Release your bind. Put your hands on your hips. Lead with your eyes. Begin to slowly rise up. High mountain pose. Stretch your arms over your head. Look up at your fingers. Big breath in. Full breath out. One more big breath. Bring your hands to the center of your chest. Set your eyes on your fingertips. And then bring your thumbs to the center of your forehead and bow your head forward. Close your eyes. In honor of each one of us, our drishti, and the practice, I bow to you and say namaste. Thank you so much for joining this practice. I hope you enjoyed the practice of drishti. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Ask any questions that you've got, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, please consider joining my Patreon or leaving a comment and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube.